She mopped his floors at night. He mocked her by day. But when one arrogant dare revealed her brilliance, everything he thought he knew about power, status, and love began to unravel. He was the CEO with a fortune and a god complex. She was the cleaning lady with 5 languages, a hidden degree, and nothing left to lose. He challenged her as a joke. She changed his world by accident. Hello family, welcome to True Life Stories. Please subscribe and leave a like for us, it means the world to us. Also share this video to your friends and loved ones and turn on post notifications so you don't miss future videos from us. Thank you as you do so. Sit back and relax as we dive into the story. The city skyline reflected off the vast windows of the top floor of Hargrove Technologies, a rising titan in artificial intelligence and global automation. Inside the pristine, minimalist office sat its ruler, Julian Hargrove. 36 years old, impeccably dressed in a charcoal gray suit that cost more than most people's rent, Julian leaned back in his Italian leather chair with a smug smirk playing on his lips. The entire room was a testament to wealth and taste. High ceilings, original abstract art, shelves lined with awards, and a view that screamed power. Julian was brilliant. That much was universally accepted. A prodigy from age 14, he had started coding algorithms while other kids were figuring out algebra. By 27, he'd sold his first tech startup for 8 figures. Now, less than a decade later, he was CEO of a multi-billion-dollar company employing over 2,000 people globally. The problem wasn't his intellect, it was his mouth. And his ego. He didn't walk through the office. He glided like a monarch through a courtroom, his tailored steps exuding the assurance that he owned everything and everyone in the room. His employees, most of them Ivy League graduates, treated him with a mix of admiration and fear. Julian didn't believe in softness. He believed in efficiency, results, and hierarchy, and anyone who didn't sit at the top, in his eyes, was invisible. That included the cleaning staff. Third day this week, the hallway trash cans weren't emptied by 6 a.m., he muttered one morning to his assistant without making eye contact. If you can't train them to follow instructions, replace them. His tone was clinical, detached. The cleaning staff were just part of the background, like the coffee machine or the air conditioning. Useful, but forgettable. It was nearing 9 p.m. when Julian returned to his office after a private dinner meeting with venture capitalists. He loosened his tie and dropped a folder on his desk with a bored sigh. That's when he noticed her. The cleaning lady. She moved quietly around the room, her curly hair pulled into a tight bun, wearing the standard black uniform. She was wiping the glass table with methodical strokes, carefully lifting the items on the desk and placing them back in perfect order. Julian barely glanced at her. It annoyed him that she didn't jump when she saw him. Most of the junior staff did. She just kept working, her eyes focused, posture steady. "Doesn't anyone teach you to knock?" he said, not really expecting a reply. She paused briefly, then calmly replied, "It's cleaning hours, sir. I thought the room was empty." Julian scoffed under his breath and turned away, flipping open his laptop. She resumed dusting a shelf. He watched her in the reflection of the glass wall. Quiet, mechanical, unbothered, probably uneducated, he thought. He had no idea her name. Why would he? She was just one of the dozens who mopped and scrubbed at night while the real work happened in the daylight. He remembered a report sitting on his desk, a client pitch involving a difficult translation. One of his own project managers had failed to make sense of it. A petty idea flickered across his mind. Grabbing the document, he turned to her with a mocking grin. "Hey, cleaning lady," he called out, waving the paper. "I'll triple your salary if you can translate this." There was laughter in his voice, but no warmth. It wasn't a real offer. It was performance, something to amuse himself, a little reminder of the gap between his world and hers. She turned around slowly, and for a second, he thought he saw something flicker in her eyes. Annoyance? Intelligence? No, probably just surprise. He held out the page casually, waiting for her to fumble, waiting for her to stare at it in confusion. Instead, she took it from him without hesitation. "Mandarin?" she asked, scanning the text. Then, under her breath, she began translating line by line seamlessly. Julian's smirk faded. She didn't stop at literal meaning. She adjusted the structure, corrected syntax errors, and even pointed out a mistranslation in the original Chinese text. He blinked. Who the hell was this girl? For a long moment, there was silence in the office. The kind of silence that feels heavy, awkward for one person, soul-splitting for the other. Julian Hargrove stared at the young woman in front of him, the paper still in her hand, now annotated with corrections in the margin. She handed it back to him like it was nothing, as if she hadn't just unraveled a professional translation problem in under 2 minutes. "Who are you?" Julian asked, but his voice had lost its edge. There was no sarcasm this time, only stunned curiosity. The woman stood upright, holding his gaze with quiet confidence. "I'm Amanda. Amanda Daniels." He blinked, expecting more. When she didn't continue, he narrowed his eyes. "How do you know Mandarin?" "I study languages," she replied plainly, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. She didn't smile, didn't gloat. In fact, she looked more inconvenienced than impressed with herself. Julian, who prided himself on controlling every room he stepped into, suddenly felt unprepared. He leaned against his desk and crossed his arms. "What kind of cleaning lady studies languages?" She raised a brow. "The kind who can't afford tuition unless she works 2 jobs." Julian's mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. The weight of her statement lingered in the air between them. He looked down at the translation again, scanning the notes she'd made in the margins. Her writing was neat, analytical, confident. She hadn't just translated the passage. She'd understood it, contextualized it, and improved it. Even his lead project manager hadn't been able to do that. Amanda began gathering her cleaning supplies, apparently uninterested in continuing the conversation. She'd seen men like Julian before, cocky, wealthy, entitled. Her intelligence often made people uncomfortable, especially when it came from someone holding a mop. So, she never bothered explaining herself to people like him. She'd learned a long time ago that silence was often more powerful than explanation. But Julian was no longer mocking. He was curious, and something else he rarely felt, impressed. "Wait," he said before she could reach the door. "What else do you study?" She turned slowly, sighing inwardly. "I'm in my final year at Lakeshore University, majoring in linguistics and comparative literature. I speak 5 languages fluently: Mandarin, French, Russian, Spanish, and Yoruba. Working on Arabic." Julian's eyebrows lifted. "You're fluent in all of those?" "Yes." "Why are you here?" he asked, more to himself than to her. "Why are you cleaning floors?" Amanda's eyes softened a little, not in pity, but in resilience. "Because scholarships only cover so much. My mom passed 2 years ago. My brother's in high school. Someone has to pay the bills." Julian didn't know what to say. He had spent his entire career surrounded by overachievers, yet none of them had to vacuum floors at night and write thesis papers by dawn. She moved toward the door again, her cleaning cart squeaking quietly beside her. "Amanda," Julian said, her name sounding foreign but strong in his mouth. She stopped again. "Do you want a job?" She tilted her head, skeptical. "This is a job." "No, I mean," he faltered, for once unsure how to present himself. "I mean something else. A position here. Something more fitting for someone like you." She looked him over, searching for the sarcasm, the arrogance. But this time it wasn't there. His tone was sincere. Curious. Even a little bit shaken. "I'm not a charity case," she said finally. "I don't think you are," he replied. Their eyes locked again, and for the first time, Julian didn't see a cleaner. He saw a woman who'd worked harder than most of his executives just to stand in this room. And Amanda saw something in him too. Maybe not quite humility yet, but the first crack in a well-fortified ego. She nodded, said nothing more, and exited the room. Julian stood in place for several long minutes, the translation paper still in his hand. The night outside his office windows glittered with city lights, but for once, it wasn't the view that held his attention. It was the name he'd just learned, Amanda Daniels. And for reasons he couldn't explain, Not yet. That name had just shifted something inside him. The next morning, the usually electric energy on the executive floor of Hargrove Technologies felt dull to Julian. He arrived earlier than usual, black coffee in hand, tailored coat flaring behind him, as he walked past his assistant and barely mumbled a greeting. "Morning, Mr. Hargrove," she chirped, handing him the day's schedule. He barely glanced at it. He walked straight into his office and closed the door. The translation document still sat on his desk, now placed neatly where Amanda had left it. He picked it up again, as if to confirm that what had happened the night before hadn't been some strange hallucination. The corrections were still there, unmistakably sharp. Clean penmanship. Confidence in every line. Julian sat down slowly, staring at the paper. 5 languages, he muttered to himself. While pushing a mop, he spun in his chair absently, staring out at the skyline. Something about the entire encounter gnawed at him. Not because she had embarrassed him, but because she had done something that few ever had, disarmed him. The moment had stripped him of his usual dominance, and he wasn't sure whether he was irritated or intrigued. He finally buzzed his assistant. "Marcy, get me HR. Now." Within the hour, he had the full personnel file on Amanda Daniels, or at least what little they had. She wasn't even an official company employee. She was contracted through a third-party cleaning service. No salary records, no ID badge, no office email. Julian frowned. This girl had slipped through the company's notice not because she was unremarkable, but because no one had bothered to look, including him. He closed the file and stood. That evening, Amanda returned to the 39th floor like she always did. Backpack slung over one shoulder, earbuds in, hoodie pulled tight. The office was mostly empty by then, the hum of electronics the only sound besides the occasional squeak of her cleaning cart's wheels. She didn't expect to see Julian waiting in his office. He usually left before sunset unless there was a crisis. Tonight, he was sitting on the edge of his desk in shirt sleeves, his jacket draped over the back of his chair. When she entered, he looked up. "You came back," he said, standing. "Why wouldn't I?" she replied, removing one earbud but continuing to push the cart forward. "I thought maybe you'd quit. After last night." Amanda chuckled softly. "I've had worse things said to me than being underestimated by a CEO." Julian winced a little. "Fair." She started to wipe down a side table. "I meant what I said," he added, watching her. "About the job. I wasn't mocking you." Amanda stopped, stood straight, and looked at him again. "You were." Julian's jaw tensed. "At first, yes." "Exactly," she said. "That's why it didn't matter." She resumed cleaning. Julian ran a hand through his head, suddenly frustrated with how clumsy he felt in this conversation. He was used to boardrooms and billion-dollar ideas, not this. "I want to fix that," he said after a beat. Now she paused, genuinely caught off guard. He stepped forward slowly, not close enough to crowd her, but enough to meet her eye level. "I've been running this place thinking I knew everything about everyone. You proved me wrong in 30 seconds. Most people don't like being proven wrong," Amanda replied, not unkindly. "Maybe that's why most people stay small," Julian said. "You're not small. You shouldn't be cleaning these floors." She held his gaze for a long moment. "You don't know me." "No, but I want to." Amanda's eyes narrowed. "Why?" Julian shrugged slightly. "Because last night I mocked someone I assumed was beneath me. But today, I can't stop wondering how someone that smart ended up here. I want to understand that." Her face remained unreadable, though a flicker of something, interest, amusement, passed over it. "I don't need pity." "Good," he said. "Because I don't offer it." There was another pause, long and dense. Finally, Amanda sighed. "What exactly are you offering?" Julian moved to his desk, picked up a folder, and handed it to her. Inside was a proposal, a temporary consulting contract in the company's International Development Division. Language support, cultural strategy, project assistance. Flexible hours. A starting rate that more than tripled her current income. Amanda scanned it quickly, then looked up. "This isn't charity?" "No. It's interest," Julian said. In someone who clearly knows more than most of my staff. She closed the folder slowly. I'll think about it. Julian smiled faintly. That's fair. She turned to leave, but just before exiting, she looked over her shoulder. You ever mock me again, she said. Triple pay or not, I'll make you translate your resignation letter in Russian. Julian burst out laughing, genuine, full-bodied laughter that startled even himself. Amanda smiled just barely, then walked out. And in that small moment, Julian realized something he hadn't felt in a long time: respect. Real, earned, and humbling. Julian Hargrove had always believed himself to be a good judge of people. He had built an empire based on instinct, hiring only the brightest, the hungriest, the most polished. Ivy League resumes, high-pressure backgrounds, smooth suits and firm handshakes. That was the language of his world. And yet, in a single moment, a woman with no resume, no office, and no business card had upended that logic completely. And now she was all he could think about. The following morning, Julian found himself unusually distracted in the boardroom. He was supposed to be reviewing quarterly performance slides, but instead, he was replaying her voice, Amanda Daniels, precise, clear, and deliberate. He remembered how she hadn't begged or flattered, hadn't tried to impress him. She had simply been impressive. After the meeting, he retreated to his office and pulled up her file again, though there still wasn't much to see. Her employment record consisted of a contract through Silvaline Janitorial Services, her first name misspelled as Amanda, and a vague job title, night floor maintenance. That didn't sit right with him. He picked up the phone and called Marcy, his assistant. Get someone from Silvaline on the line, he said. I want to know more about Amanda Daniels. And ask HR if we can speak with her directly. See if she can come up to my office after her shift tonight. Marcy paused. You want to interview the cleaning lady? Don't call her that, Julian said, sharper than he intended. Just set it up. That evening, Amanda stepped onto the executive floor again, but this time, not with her cart. She wore a clean black blouse, jeans, and her hair tied in a soft, low puff. She looked like a student again. Not invisible. Not background noise. She was uncertain what to expect, but curiosity had a way of pulling her toward things she normally avoided. She knocked on Julian's door for the first time. Come in, came his voice. He stood as she entered, surprisingly, not suited. He wore a dress shirt, sleeves rolled up, no tie. Less CEO, more man. I was beginning to think you'd turn me down, Julian said with a small smile. I nearly did, Amanda replied. Thought it might be another joke. Julian gestured toward a chair across from his desk. It's not. She sat down carefully. He noticed she carried a notebook in her bag, its cover frayed, full of bookmarks and folded pages. He pointed at it. Class notes. Amanda nodded. Linguistics, phonetic structures. Also some grant applications. You're really funding your whole education like this? Yes. Cleaning during the week. I tutor on weekends. And I freelance as a translator when I can. Julian exhaled slowly, watching her with new eyes. You realize that's extraordinary? I don't have the luxury of ordinary. He leaned back in his chair, folding his arms. You're not like anyone I've ever met, Amanda. She raised an eyebrow, unconvinced. You mean I'm not like anyone you've noticed? Touché. Julian smiled, sheepish. Guilty. A pause passed between them, not tense but thoughtful. Tell me about your studies, he asked, more gently now. Amanda lit up, even if only slightly. My thesis is on endangered languages, how cultural extinction is often linked to economic oppression. Most people think language is just communication, but it's history, identity, politics. When a language dies, so does a way of thinking. Julian listened, genuinely intrigued. He watched the way her hands moved when she spoke, the way her voice shifted gears, calm but passionate, soft but firm. She wasn't trying to impress him. She was just being herself. Why linguistics? He asked. Amanda leaned forward slightly. Because words matter. People assume power comes from money or position, but words shape perception. Entire empires rise and fall because of how ideas are translated, miscommunicated, or misunderstood. Julian's chest tightened a little. He realized this woman who used to empty his trash understood the world with more depth than most executives he'd hired. "Why didn't you apply here before?" he asked. "You're clearly overqualified for cleaning." "I did," she replied calmly. "Twice. Got no response." He blinked. "What?" "Guess my resume didn't scream worth your time." She gave him a look, not bitter but brutally honest. Julian felt the burn of embarrassment in his chest. He had built a culture that prized polish and pedigree so much that someone like Amanda hadn't even been granted a second glance. A system that he created had let her fall through the cracks. He looked away, ashamed. "I'm sorry," he said. Amanda tilted her head. "For what?" "For being part of a world that only sees value in the packaging." The room fell silent for a moment, the air between them growing softer. Julian leaned forward, hands clasped together on the desk. "I want to change that," he said. "Starting with you." Amanda looked skeptical. "You don't even know what I want. So tell me." She hesitated. For the first time, her confidence wavered. "I want to do work that matters," she said quietly. "To use what I know to build bridges, not clean around the walls." Julian nodded. "Then help me do that. I'm offering you more than a desk or a salary. I want your mind in this company." She met his gaze and studied it. For the first time, she saw sincerity in his eyes. Not pity, not ego, just intention. "All right," she said. "I'll try." A small smile tugged at Julian's lips. "No," he replied. "Don't try. Do." Amanda stood up, slinging her bag over her shoulder again. She paused at the door and turned slightly. "If you ever underestimate me again," she said, "I won't correct you with words." Julian raised an eyebrow. "What then?" She smiled. "I'll let your company pay for it." And with that, she walked out. Julian remained seated, struck by a simple truth. He'd thought he ran this place. But somehow, in less than 24 hours, Amanda Daniels had changed everything. 3 weeks later, Amanda Daniels stood in front of the gleaming elevator doors on the 39th floor. But this time, she wasn't holding a mop or pushing a cart. She wore a crisp navy blue blouse tucked into tailored slacks, a satchel slung over one shoulder, and a visitor's badge clipped to her chest with her name printed in bold. Amanda Daniels, temp consultant. When the elevator doors opened, she stepped into the executive floor with her shoulders back and chin lifted. There was a kind of stillness in her expression, not arrogance, but certainty. She didn't need to prove anything. She had already done that the night Julian challenged her. Now she was here to work. But not everyone was ready to accept that. The first few days were layered. Julian had sent out a formal memo introducing her as a consultant in international strategy, language advisor, and cultural liaison. But no one had really understood what that meant. In truth, it was a custom role, a role created specifically for her. That fact alone stirred unease among some of the staff. "Who is she, really?" whispered Candace, the VP of marketing, when Amanda walked past. "I heard she used to clean the offices," muttered someone from finance. "Julian's personal project," another scoffed. Amanda heard them. All of it. But she didn't flinch. She had walked into classrooms where people assumed she didn't belong, had sat through lectures where professors pronounced her name wrong. She had waited tables where customers thought her only skill was smiling politely. Let them whisper. She wasn't here for them. Her first meeting was with the Global Expansion Team, an ambitious project targeting East Asia and West Africa. It was a room full of suits, laptops, coffee cups, and slide decks. She sat quietly at first, listening, watching. Julian was at the head of the table, observing too, but differently. He watched her. He saw the way she took notes, small, efficient bullet points in shorthand. The way her eyes moved, quick, alert, absorbing everything. She was playing small for now, but he knew what was coming. Halfway through the meeting, a mid-level strategist named Peter misread a cultural nuance about expanding into Nigeria. He used a Western marketing example that, to him, sounded inclusive. Amanda spoke up. "Actually," she said, her voice even, That messaging won't resonate in Lagos or Port Harcourt. The phrasing implies dependence, which may come across as patronizing, especially from a Western tech firm. Peter blinked. I'm not sure that's accurate. Our analytics team. I'm Nigerian, Amanda said calmly. I grew up in Abeokuta. I've seen how campaigns like this fail not because of numbers, but because of assumptions. The room fell silent. Julian let the moment stretch, then looked at Peter. She's right. Peter nodded, swallowed his pride, and typed something into his laptop. After the meeting, Julian caught up with her in the hallway. Remind me again why I had 10 people working on that strategy before you got here, he said with a grin. Amanda smirked. Because you hadn't looked past their resumes yet. Over the next few weeks, her influence began to spread, quietly at first, but unmistakably. She revised entire sections of the company's multilingual user interface. She rewrote documentation for overseas clients in more nuanced language. She created a briefing on African market etiquette that saved a high-profile investor call from crashing. Slowly, the whispers faded. Then came curiosity. Then came respect. Julian began inviting her to sit in on higher-level meetings, once just as an observer, then as a contributor. Her opinions were sharp, concise, and unshaken. She never rambled, never performed. She just delivered. Every single time. One Friday evening, Julian knocked lightly on her temporary office door. She was still there, as usual, working late. He leaned against the doorway. Got a minute? Amanda looked up. Sure. He stepped inside. We're flying out to Geneva next month. I want you on the international negotiations team. She blinked. That's not a consulting task. Exactly, he said. It's a leadership one. She studied him for a moment, lips pressing into a thoughtful line. What's the real reason? Julian didn't hesitate. Because I trust your voice more than half the people sitting in executive chairs. There was no flirtation in his tone. No game. Just truth. Amanda leaned back in her chair. That's a lot of trust for someone who only noticed me 3 weeks ago. Julian's expression softened. That's on me. Not on you. She glanced at her screen, then back at him. I'm not going to fail. But I also won't apologize for taking up space. I don't want you to, he said. I want you to own it. She exhaled slowly, then nodded. All right. I'm in. Julian straightened up, and before leaving, added one last comment, almost as an afterthought. You've changed this place more than you know. Once he was gone, Amanda sat alone in the quiet hum of the office, eyes fixed on her screen. But she wasn't looking at the presentation. She was looking at the cursor blinking in a document titled, The Language of Power. It was the opening line of her thesis. And suddenly, it didn't feel like just a paper anymore. It felt like a future being rewritten, in her own words. Amanda hadn't expected her office to become a sanctuary. It was small, barely more than a glorified closet with a desk and a window that stared into a brick wall. But over time, it had grown into something else, a space she'd carved out of a world that once ignored her. She had a corkboard now, pinned with notes and reminders, quotes from Chinua Achebe and bell hooks, and a coffee mug that read, Words are weapons. Wield them wisely. Julian had given it to her as a joke. But she kept it anyway. They were spending more and more time together. Officially, it was work, international calls, briefings, late-night strategy sessions. But the line between business and something else had started to blur, softly, like ink seeping across paper. It began subtly. One night, Amanda stayed late. Yet again, finalizing a presentation for the Geneva pitch. Julian popped into her office with 2 containers of takeout and a bottle of sparkling water. You haven't eaten, he said without asking. She looked up from her screen, startled. You stalking my calendar now? He shrugged with a smirk. I saw your meeting ended at 9. Figured you'd forget dinner. Again. She eyed the bag. Thai. From that place on 8th. The spicy one you like. Amanda narrowed her eyes. You remembered? Julian just smiled and handed her the container. They ate in comfortable silence, the soft clink of chopsticks and keyboard clicks filling the room. Every now and then, their eyes met brief, unspoken moments. Neither one said anything. Not yet. Another night, after an exhausting investor call that had gone off the rails, Julian slumped onto the sofa in her office and stared at the ceiling. I used to think success meant being the smartest person in the room, he muttered. Amanda didn't look up from her laptop. And now I think it means knowing who to shut up and listen to. She glanced at him, lips quirking. That's growth, she said. He laughed softly. Is that what this is? I always thought it'd feel more like enlightenment, not mild humiliation. Amanda chuckled, finally closing her laptop. She stood and stretched, then leaned against the desk, arms folded. You know, she said, when I first met you, I thought you were unbearable. Julian sat up. Only at first? Don't get ahead of yourself. He smiled, but this time it lingered. A softer smile. A real one. Amanda. She blinked. Yeah. Why haven't I scared you off? She tilted her head. Because I don't scare easy. And because I've seen worse. Worse than me. She walked over to the window and looked out at the night, her voice distant. I've watched people lose everything and still smile. I've watched my mom work 2 jobs and still come home and help me with homework. I've sat in rooms full of people who doubted me, and I learned to speak so well they couldn't ignore me anymore. Julian stood slowly. His voice dropped to something gentler. You're not afraid of being overlooked anymore, are you? She turned to face him. No, because I've already outgrown that version of myself. Something shifted in the air between them, quiet, electric. Julian stepped forward, not too close, but enough to lower his voice. I think about you, he said. Amanda didn't move. You think about a lot of things. Not like this. A long pause. She looked at him, really looked, and saw something beyond the polished charm. A man who, for all his success, was just beginning to understand the value of seeing people. A man who had been taught power, but not vulnerability. I didn't come here for this, she said quietly. I know. I came here to survive. I know that too. And now, he took one more step. Now you're building something bigger than survival. She inhaled, steady but unsure. Julian, if we cross that line. He nodded. I know. We risk something. Another long silence. Then, softly, not dramatically, Amanda reached for his hand. And he didn't let go. It was nothing loud. No music. No kiss. Just 2 people, once separated by status, perception, and ego, standing in a room they'd remade together. It was quiet, but powerful. A shift in more than just roles. A shift in hearts. The day of Amanda Daniels' graduation arrived beneath a slate-gray sky. Rain threatened, but never fell, the clouds hovering like quiet witnesses over the university's sprawling courtyard. Rows of folding chairs lined the campus lawn, filled with proud families, anxious graduates, and faculty in bright regalia. In the front row, tucked discreetly behind a row of professors, sat Julian Hargrove. He was out of place in every obvious way. No cap, no gown, no student ID, but no one dared ask why he was there. His eyes never left the stage. Not when the deans gave their speeches. Not during the honorary degree presentation. He waited for one name. And then it came. Valedictorian of the class of 2025, Amanda Olu Daniels. Julian stood before he realized it, the only one clapping before the crowd caught up to him. She walked onto the stage in a flowing black gown, cords of distinction draped over her shoulders. Her natural curls peeked out from under her cap, and when she smiled, it was the kind that lit something internal in every observer. But her eyes found him first, and that smile deepened. She spoke with the same clarity she always had, no flowery metaphors, no self-congratulations. She spoke of grit, of fighting for space in rooms that were never built for people like her, of invisible labor, of how she mopped the floors of this city's skyline buildings, then stayed up until sunrise learning the languages of the world that rarely spoke hers back. She didn't name Julian, but she looked at him when she said, "We are not defined by what people expect from us. We are defined by what we choose to become, once we decide that permission is not required." The applause came like a wave. She bowed her head once, stepped off the stage, and disappeared into the arms of her younger brother, now taller than her, but beaming like a child seeing his hero. Later that night, under a velvet sky on the rooftop of one of Chicago's oldest buildings, Julian hosted a private celebration. Just close friends, a few of his executive team, a handful of Amanda's classmates, a catered Nigerian fusion menu, jazz humming low in the background. No press, no speeches, just people who mattered. Amanda arrived fashionably late. She wore a sleek white jumpsuit and low heels, the confidence in her walk a visible thing. Her brother clung to her side protectively at first, but eventually wandered toward the dessert table when Julian approached. "You look like the person I always suspected you were," he said softly, handing her a glass of hibiscus lemonade. "And you," she replied, "look like a man who's learning to blend in instead of stand above." Julian laughed gently. "I'll take that as growth." They stood at the edge of the rooftop overlooking the city. The same skyline that had once cast long shadows over Amanda now stood level with her gaze. Julian turned toward her, hand tucked in his pocket. "I have something for you." "I told you no gifts," she warned. "This isn't a gift," he said. "It's an offer." He handed her a sleek white envelope. Amanda opened it slowly. Her eyes scanned the letter inside and froze. Director of Global Communications. She looked up sharply. "Julian, permanent position, full benefits, international travel. You'll head the entire cross-cultural strategy division. And there's a postgraduate scholarship, if you still want grad school." She blinked at him. "Why me?" Julian stepped closer, voice low and certain. "Because you've redefined what this company values. You've reminded us that language is not just for communication, it's for connection. You gave us a voice we didn't know we needed." Amanda looked down at the offer letter again. The girl who once scrubbed the floors of this very company now stood on top of it. And somehow it didn't feel like a fantasy. It felt like justice. She folded the letter, slid it back into the envelope, and looked up at him. "I'll accept," she said, "on one condition." Julian raised an eyebrow. "Anything. No more underestimating people just because of where they enter the room." He nodded solemnly. "Deal." "And," she added, stepping in just a little closer, "if we're going to keep building something together, professionally and personally, I need us to be equals. No pedestal. No savior. Just you and me. Clear?" Julian's gaze held hers. Crystal. There was no grand kiss. No fireworks. Just the quiet gravity of two people who had chosen each other. Not out of convenience or status or timing, but out of recognition. Out of truth. Above them, the lights of the city blinked like constellations. And beneath them, the rooftop buzzed with laughter and music. But between Julian and Amanda, there was only stillness. The stillness of something real beginning. We have come to the end of the story. I hope you enjoyed it. Leave a like and subscribe to my YouTube channel for more interesting stories.